Welcome. You're listening to John Hyman from Commercial Real Estate Online. This is one of the many videos we put out for commercial real estate agents and brokers around the world as regards to leasing, sales and property management activity, of course, in commercial real estate. And this particular video continues a topic relating to property management. And property management within commercial property is quite complex. Many different things to think about, as you can see from this list, and today I'll be covering a few more of these things for you. If you haven't visited our website before, please do so. It is commercial-realestate-training.com, and at that website you can log into the community online and get plenty of tips through the email system. We try to share as much as we can when it comes to office, industrial and retail property. So now let's go back here and look at property management, most particularly commercial property management, and within that category you will have industrial property, office and also retail property. The topic that I have chosen to talk to today is leases. Now leases, of course, they evolve from the investment property that you will be managing. Now you can be the best manager in your town or city. That being said, you've got a lot of things to understand. And of course, there are many different things up here on the right hand side of this chart, which you can see. And I do cover those in other videos as well. But as part of property management, you need to understand the tenancy mix. And within the tenancy mix, you need to understand the leases. So if you have a large property with many tenants, you'll have many leases to understand. And of course there, most of those leases will be different. There will be different dates, different factors of occupancy, and the leases will challenge you. Therefore you need to be reasonably detailed in the property management processes and the systems to support your property management activities. So let's look at leases a little bit more, and I'll choose some of these things to talk about. Most particularly we'll start with critical dates. So critical dates is a terminology which comes from leases. And critical dates relate to the dates within leases that you need to watch out for. Of course, every lease is unique, so you need to review leases and then look at the critical dates within the leases that need to be monitored, checked and responded by, as the case may be with each particular tenancy in a property. Now, if you manage a very large shopping centre or a very large office building, you'll have many leases to go through. And the best time to do that is as soon as you take over the property management activity. You capture all the critical dates, you capture all the information from the leases and put it into a software program so that you can watch the diary dates as they come up and get in front of those critical dates before the actions are required. So I've put a few categories here for issues that evolve out of critical dates within leases. Now, expiry dates. These are the expiry dates of the leases. And generally speaking, a lease is taken out for a number of years. It might be 3, 4, 5 years, perhaps longer. So the expiry dates will say that the lease comes to an end on a certain date in the future, or perhaps there may be a renewal date which also comes into being. So you might take out a lease for, say, 3 years with a particular tenant, and then it may also have an option, a renewal opportunity at the end of that lease to go for another period of time, another 3 years or so, maybe longer, maybe 5 years. So you need to understand the expiry dates, you need to understand the renewal dates. And the critical dates within that, most particularly when you look at the renewal will usually require some exercise to be made, the exercise of the date to be made maybe 6 months, maybe 3 months out from the actual expiry. So if someone wants to renew the lease, they have to satisfy the terms of the lease itself, and that will say that the renewal should occur perhaps 3 months or perhaps 6 months before the expiry date. So those two things there go hand in hand. And the only way you'll get to understand them is by reading the lease, singularly and particularly extracting the dates, the critical dates from the lease itself. And then of course you capture those dates into a software program so that you can monitor those dates as the lease transpires. Now, some other critical dates within the lease. Let's look at outgoings reporting. Now, outgoings relate to the costs of occupancy. And if you have a tenant that has a net lease, for example, the net lease infers that outgoings are paid on top of the basic rental for the property. So outgoings will be contributed to, perhaps on a monthly basis or an annual basis, and you as the property manager need to stay on top of that. So outgoings reporting, reconciliation, and also the actual outgoings as far as advising the tenant of those outgoings throughout the year will have certain timing and date requirements. So look at the lease and just see how the outgoings need to be reported to throughout the year. So let's look at some more dates, and let's go to renovation dates. Now, some tenants have a need to renovate premises, and that requirement will be placed into their lease. Perhaps in an older property or perhaps in a longer lease, there will be a renovation requirement on the tenant to upgrade their premises. That's what a renovation is all about. And it could be once every 3 years or 4 years during the lease duration that a renovation is required by the tenant to a particular standard. Now, the lease itself will tell you exactly the standard that is required in that renovation activity. Now let's look at another critical date, rent reviews. Rent reviews are those things that escalate the rent at regular periods of time through the term of the lease. It's not unusual to have annual rent reviews or perhaps rent reviews every 2 years. Now, the rent reviews are undertaken in different ways, and sometimes there are dates required to activate those rent reviews, and that is certainly the case when it comes to market rent reviews. Market rent reviews are those things that stipulate a rental increase to the market evidence that's out there for that particular property type in your town or city. So, rent review dates, they're definitely there. They're in the lease. You need to understand what those dates are, and you put them into your software program so that you stay ahead of those dates. Now also, let's look at turnover provisions. Now this one's a little bit unusual. It's most particularly active when it comes to retail type leases and tenancies. Sometimes retail tenants have a rental provision which is geared to the turnover of their business, so that if they sell $25,000 turnover worth of stock during a particular month, for an example, that may in turn turn into some rental activity which is paid by the tenant back to the landlord. So turnover provisions are quite common when it comes to retail type leases. So that is the critical dates. There are others, but the issue here is that you need to understand the leases regards critical dates, and the only way you can do that is to read the lease itself. And in saying that, I will emphasize that most very good property managers and leasing experts understand how to read leases, and of course you need to know that as well. So let's look a little bit further and go into some filing systems for leases. Now, the lease itself will lead you into many different issues, and you need to have filing systems or record systems or activities that keep things under control within the lease document. I've put some headings here for you. These all evolve from the lease itself. So every tenant will have a lease. From that, you'll have filing systems relating to that lease. And we now go into the subsets, and we have budgets. Now, these are budgets that apply to the particular tenancy. That will be both an income and an expenditure budget, and that budget should have been set prior to the beginning of the financial year. Of course, that budget should have been set in accordance with the terms of the lease as it applies, and the landlord should have approved that budget as part of the business plan for the property. Of course, building records will always relate to the particular tenancy, and again, you should have filing systems relating to that tenancy. Expenditure records, they are the things that are spent within the tenancy, within the property also, but you may have expenditure records which are relevant to the particular tenancy and the lease. And of course, you'll have income records that relate to the particular tenancy. That is where income is paid each month under the terms and conditions of that lease, and that income will be affected by rent reviews and options. So there you go. That's how income records are essential to be maintained from a building records point of view. Now, landlord records, of course, reflect the reports that you give landlords relative to the tenancy mix and the property performance. And landlord records relative to each tenancy should be maintained well. That will mean that every activity within the tenancy, with the tenant itself or within the property, should be recorded and then put in some formal report to the landlord by the end of the month. Landlord reports relative to the property and the tenancy are therefore important for future checking and also going back on any information that's critical to the performance of the property. So landlord records and landlord reports go hand in hand. If the landlord tells you to do something relative to a tenancy, you've got to record that within the tenancy file in case the landlord forgets that they've done that, or you need further proof of that decision at a later time. So landlord records relative to the tenancy and the lease need to be maintained within that individual tenant record system, and landlord reports relative to that tenancy should also be maintained. Now, maintenance. Certainly a property will have maintenance activity most of the time that's underway, and some of that maintenance will relate to the particular tenancy. Now, for example, if you have a retail tenancy, you might have issues with electricity supply, perhaps air conditioning, perhaps repairs within the tenancy relating to occupational health and safety issues, or fire services or security issues. So the maintenance within the tenancy is an individual standalone issue. So maintenance is recorded against the tenancy record, then of course it's recorded against the building record. And lastly, let's look at tenant records. Now, tenant records relate to the activities and the discussions that you have with the tenant. Everything that you say and do with the tenant should be recorded on file, and that will mean file notes. It's interesting to understand that many tenants will forget, conveniently perhaps, the decisions that were made earlier regarding certain contentious issues relating to occupancy. So keep the records relating to the tenancy and the tenant discussions and any meetings that you have. So there you go. These are the filing systems relating to a particular lease with a tenant. Let's say you have one tenant with one lease. You should then have filing systems relating to that particular tenancy and that lease. There will be budgets, building records relating to the tenancy, expenditure records, things that are spent within that tenancy, income records, landlord records of decisions with that tenancy, landlord reports, maintenance records for that tenancy, and tenant records. So that's the filing systems within the lease structure. So that's the end of this particular topic. I won't go further in this video today because I have covered quite a few things, but there are other sections to be covered in later videos. And of course you can see guarantees, lease audit, lease options, outgoings, etc. There's quite a lot of other things to work through. And to keep this video at a sensible length so you can visit other videos at a later time, I will cut this program off at this point in time. So come back to us regularly and you'll get the next stage of the discussion. So we'll now, in the next video, move to guarantees and we'll go on from there. So this is part of the Property Management Education and Training Program, and if you haven't visited us before, please do so at the website, which is commercial-realestate-training.com. Now, my name is John Hyman. I run the training programs at that website. I'm a commercial real estate broker and agent, have been so for many years, and I tend to share my tips, tools and ideas with agents and brokers around the world. The community online is very large. We have some good stories to tell and some experiences to share at the online website. So please join us, and I look forward to talking with you or perhaps sharing my ideas through the email system with you at that website. This is John Hyman from Commercial Real Estate Online, signing off for now. I'll catch you again very soon with another online training video. We'll catch you later on.